blast off. Hello, and welcome to the How to Use Psychedelics podcast. We'll be starting with a short meditation to tune into this moment together. I'm here with my friend Jack. My name's Louie, or Lou. I invite you to tune into the sensation of your sit bones if you're sitting down and your feet if you're walking. Just noticing the sensations in the body. Noticing the weight of your body against the ground. Gravity pulling you down. Moving towards the breath sensation. And noticing the movement of the breath in the body, whether that be at your nose, in the nostrils, around the nostrils, or the chest or the stomach. Notice how you can relax and surrender on your exhales, letting go of any tension you might be holding in your face, your arms, your mind. Let yourself sink deeper into the moment, into your body with each exhale. And lastly, notice how with your inhale you can lengthen the spine. You might imagine a string pulling the crown of your head up towards the ceiling. Finding a comfortable posture, sitting or standing. And gently opening your eyes. I hope you weren't driving if you're doing this. And welcome. Like I said, my name is Louie or Lou, and I'm tuning in from Costa Rica. Jack, hello.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Jack, aka Wholesome Guide, and I am a queer man tuning in from Nelson, British Columbia, Canada.
Right on. So we'll be starting with some short intros, and we'll be moving on to explaining what How to Use Psychedelics is, what exactly this podcast is about. And before leaving you, we'll just share a little bit about ourselves or our psychedelic experiences. And so my name's Louie. I discovered psychedelics when I was 17. I was deeply curious about spirituality and the concept of enlightenment or awakening, and I thought psychedelics could get me there. I quickly became interested in their therapeutic and transformative potential after trying them, as I could feel that my experiences were deeply healing and meaningful and mystical. And so I also started using them a bit too much. And I ended up having a deeply destabilizing experience, which I call the dark night of the soul, as it's eerily similar to an account from St. John of the Cross, a mystic who wrote about the dark night of the soul. And so that experience really deepened my interest in transpersonal psychology, the work of Stanislav Grof, religion and mysticism, and how psychedelics relate to all of that. Finally, my experiences led me to study and practice Buddhism, especially Zen Buddhism and yoga. I was quite devoted to meditation and yoga for a long time, and still am, but in a very different way now. I find more freedom in my practice. My experiences also led me to having a deep interest for and a connection to indigenous worldviews. I feel especially connected to nature, and nature as a whole being all of existence. I later went to McGill University, where I studied psychology, philosophy, and religion in the name of better understanding my psychedelic experiences. And soon after that, built HowToUsePsychedelics.com as a way to integrate everything I had learned from psychedelics and as a way to serve others who may be walking a similar path as me with psychedelics. And that path being not having any support, not really knowing much about psychedelics. This was back in 2015 when psychedelics weren't as popular. Through my experiences, I also um, came to work with this idea that I call the Saigai hypothesis, which merges eco-psychology, psychedelics, biology, and indigenous ways of seeing life to suggest that psychedelics should play a key role in reinstating homeostasis on planet Earth by influencing the perceptions and behaviors of the human species. I more recently have taught meditation and yoga at a trauma rehabilitation center, which deepened my interest in trauma and healing through meditation, yoga, and psychedelics in combination. I then also began working with and on Nectara, which is a psychedelic integration platform, community, and service. And I just moved to Costa Rica about 2 weeks ago to work at psychedelic retreats and deepen my experience and skill as a facilitator. I'm very grateful to be here with Jack, and that's me, Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Lou. So, my background and degree is in business and building startups. I've been working for the past 3 years or so in the psychedelic medicine space, helping to build companies, communities, running integration circles, and other virtual events. I've also been supporting a lot of people in navigating their own psychedelic journeys, and meanwhile doing a lot of my own work and healing through conditions like PTSD, OCD, and like a lot of men, perhaps everyone, but definitely men, a lot of unprocessed emotional stuff that was kind of ruling my life. So I call myself a personal growth facilitator and community builder. Those are first and foremost the things that I love doing. And like Lou, I've also had a number of really difficult experiences with psychedelics, um, all of which have shown me a lot about psychedelics and the nature of the mind, consciousness, the human ego. Uh, yeah, lately I feel a lot more drawn to different forms of accessing altered states like breath work, shamanic practice, meditation, though I do still dabble in psychedelics from time to time. And that has led to my life's purpose. All of this has led to my life's purpose of supporting people on their journeys, using my own healing and personal growth work as a platform to do that work. So I'm very grateful to be here with Lou and to be a part of the HTUP team. And I look forward to having some really beautiful and empowering conversations here on this podcast.
Thank you, Jack. Um, yeah, so what is HTUP? Well, first of all, that's short for How to Use Psychedelics. And HTUP was born out of a bad trip when I was 17. After abusing psychedelics for a few months, I ended up having very difficult experiences and began to wonder why I was having difficult experiences. I began reading a lot about Stan Grof, François Bozat, Terence McKenna, Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, and I realized I may not be using psychedelics properly. And so I Googled how to use psychedelics and couldn't find anything useful or relevant to where I was. I was looking for something holistic, a merging of scientific worldviews, spiritual worldviews. And I thus bought howtousepsychedelics.com and began compiling information I was learning. It wasn't until a few years after that I actually built the website and put the information online, and then built the Discord community, which you're all welcome to join through the website. The mission with How to Use Psychedelics has remained the same through the years, and that's to provide accurate and useful information about using psychedelics, specifically for healing and growth, so intentional use of psychedelics. I don't personally feel like everyone needs a therapist, guide, shaman, or retreat or clinic to use psychedelics. And so I think it's important for people to have access to the information they need to use them safely and effectively at home with their friends, with their people, their community. And yeah, after meeting Jack, the idea came to deepen the offerings we had or we offer through How to Use Psychedelics, and that led us to the development of our first course, which is how to microdose for well-being course, and that's what we're working on now, alongside this podcast and just growing the How to Use Psychedelics community.
Cool. Thanks, Lou. Yeah, and I'll just build on that a bit by talking about what this podcast intends to be, at least with where Lou and I's heads are at right now, and who our guests will be. So building on this idea that Lou said of like, not everybody needs or has access to, whether through money or like just knowing how to connect with, or, for whatever reason, not everybody has access to these resources of like a professional guide or a shaman or a retreat, or some people don't feel comfortable doing that and just want to maybe microdose on their own or work with a friend who's experienced, or, whatever it is. The ethos, I think, of How to Use Psychedelics is really powered to the people and helping people to navigate these experiences safely and effectively. Because of course there is a lot of risk and we don't want to downplay that at all. So with this podcast, what we intend to do is have conversations with people who know how to navigate the psychedelic journey, who have done some deep forms of exploration, and to really just have fun and interesting conversations about those experiences and what people have learned through them. So we'll be talking with guides, with researchers, with friends. If you're interested in coming on the pod, let us know. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And ultimately, I think our goal here is to build a sense of community and have this feel a lot more conversational and just say flowing rather than interview style. We want this to feel like you're hanging out with some friends and just listening to this conversation about psychedelics and altered states of consciousness and personal growth and healing.
Right.
One thing I'll just add is it's really important that we explicitly say that nothing we ever share here is intended to be medical advice. We are not doctors. We are not medical professionals. And also, we do not promote or condone any illegal activity. We don't want anybody getting in trouble because of anything we say. And you should always be really friggin' careful when it comes to using psychedelics or entering any altered state of consciousness. There is a lot of risk involved when playing with your mind. Lou, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just something you said reminded me of like a part of the ethos of How to Use Psychedelics is to democratize psychedelics, and that I believe psychedelic experience is a birthright, and that everyone should have access to psychedelic experience in a safe setting, whether that be at home, in a clinic, at a retreat. Um, and so, yeah, with How to Use Psychedelics, we really want to widen accessibility and accessibility to psychedelics as well as information about psychedelics, so that the conversation doesn't only revolve around treating trauma or mental health, but it can also be about deepening your sense of spirituality, connection to nature, and also fun. A lot of people have fun taking psychedelics. Where I'm at, I find it difficult to have fun on psychedelics just because they tend to bring up a lot of dark stuff. But I can definitely see how they can be fun. And so I think that's important, just to keep the conversation balanced. Psychedelics aren't only about therapy.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lou. I also just want to add something that made me think of, which is when it comes to our backgrounds, like we're on the same path as everybody else. Like there's no we're not putting ourselves above anybody. We aim to show up here with humility. And, like, I don't think that, yes, we may be further along on the path or on certain parts of it, but not all parts of it. And I think that there's going to be a lot of learning for both of us here. And I think that, like, I just want to acknowledge how open to that I am. And just that we're not trying to show up as, like the people who've done their work. Like, we're doing the work, and that work will never be finished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, doing this is part of our work. Thanks for adding that, Jack. That's true.
So we're each going to share an experience of working with altered states or psychedelics, just so you can get to know us, each of us, a little bit better. So I'll go first. And my experience happened a few years ago now, maybe 2 years ago. And there was like 6 of us, me and a bunch of friends. And we were all very different in our experience levels with altered states. And some of us were just taking psychedelics for the first handful of times. Others had done it a number of times. And each person took a different, like, some people took LSD, some people took mushrooms, and everybody took different amounts. So we really were just creating this, like, I would say, messy and dangerous combination of, like, there a lot of potential risk happening. Like, a much more ideal circumstance would have been far fewer of us, or like everybody taking a much milder dose, but we just kind of were like, screw it, like, let's just, we weren't really thinking about it. So anyways, we're having this experience, we're having fun, like, we went for a walk, we came back, we're all laughing, and then this trigger happened. Like, somebody's sister called, and they were like, we didn't know where they were, and their phone stopped kind of sending, like, we couldn't hear their voice. And so it just became this, like, oh wow, that was like kind of uncomfortable. And then it just started to evolve into this, like, more and more tense and anxious experience. And I don't know how long it had been, but after, some period of time, people were freaking out, like having a lot of shadow stuff come up. Like, these medicines help show us what's inside of us, but if we don't have the self-awareness in the moment, those shadows can just come up and kind of take over sometimes. And so with this experience, that's exactly what was happening. I noticed it in myself too. Like, we're all just trying to control this situation that was totally out of control. And, nobody knew how to hold this much space. Like, this was a particularly intense experience. And maybe if we had some really experienced guide or, leader in the room, great. But we didn't. And it was just chaos. And I was like, surrender to the experience, surrender to the experience. And, like, for me, I was like, okay, I know what this means. Like, this means breathe, relax, like, listen to what's happening within each of ourselves and, like, allow it to be, rather than trying to resist it and letting the anxiety, be in charge of our behavior. So anyways, nobody's listening. At one point I asked a question. I was like, I can't remember the exact question, but it was something like, what would it look like if I was in control of this situation right now? And I asked it quite loudly, as, like, almost like a thought experiment. And everybody started just talking, like, in response. It was, I can't fully explain what happened there, but it just was like, whoa, that was trippy. And so I just said, okay, like, screw this. I'm just going to lie down and surrender to the experience. And I did. Like, I just laid on the ground among this chaos, kind of let it unfold, closed my eyes, and just breathed, and just started having an internal experience. And what then happened was I started to connect with this really beautiful light energy. I stopped hearing what was happening around me, and I became fully immersed in my mind. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I was just surrounded and being bathed in this white, yellow, warm, loving light and energy. And this is N=1, but I think this was my first experience of, like, the divine that I really understood. It took me a while to make sense of it, but this feeling of, like, unconditional love and unlimited energy, I think, yeah, it was really beautiful. I felt empowered. I had to go back to the mayhem, soon afterwards, after however long this lasted for. But it just really opened my eyes and gave me this perspective of like, in these crazy difficult situations, that is a place that I can always return to. So it was really empowering for me. So that's my experience. There's lots more that I could share about it, but I'll keep it to that.
Thanks, Jack. And I'm sure many more experiences that we will get into eventually on this podcast. So I'd like to share an experience. Well, I think I'm going to share my first experience. It feels appropriate because this is also the first HTUP podcast episode. My first experience was on my own in my bedroom with about like a handful of mushrooms. I didn't think of measuring them. I was 17 and quite irresponsible with substances at that time. I'm guessing I took about 3 grams. I also, without knowing anything about Terence McKenna, turned off the lights and lied down on my bed in silence. Um, I had just forgotten about music. It just wasn't something I really thought about, adding to the experience. I was expecting a spiritual experience, so I don't know where that came from, but I had a certain expectation that this experience would be very powerful and potentially spiritual. And that was something I was looking for. I was looking for a deeper sense of spirituality in my life that was lacking. And I remember lying down in bed and suddenly beginning to feel my consciousness changing, and then visuals coming into this black, dark canvas of the mind. I don't remember if my eyes were open or closed, but I began seeing forms, geometric forms, moving, and I began feeling my sense of self, my ego, changing and becoming smaller or disappearing. I remember feeling fear and apprehension, but then just kind of going with it. I guess letting go. I did listen to a lot of Beatles, and I had read a little bit about psychedelics here and there. In the Steve Jobs biography where he talks about LSD, listening to the Beatles. I knew something about Timothy Leary, but I wasn't really interested all that much in these people. And suddenly I felt my sense of self completely disappear, and my experience merge completely with the black canvas and the geometrical shifting patterns. I had become those patterns. It's like I was pure experience. There was no one watching that. It was just that. And I remember my ego coming back online shortly after that, noticing that just happened, and feeling like, oh, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. This is like confirming my thoughts, my intuitions that there is more to life, which is what I was looking for. And I remember feeling so much happiness and joy about that I just stood out of my bed, turned on the lights, and began writing. I actually know before writing, I explored my room. I got up and was in awe of everything I could see. With the light on, the world was shining. Everything was shining. I remember looking at a pencil and feeling like it could see the vibrational energy of the pencil, touching things, feeling the feeling things physically. And then after that, shortly after exploring my room, I took my computer out and just began writing endlessly for most of the trip. I was just writing. I have those notes still on my computer. Maybe I can share them at some point on this podcast. I reread them recently, and they're a mix of beautiful realizations for a 17-year-old, and also nonsense, complete nonsense. But yeah, that's my first experience. I remember feeling really tired the next day because I took them at night, but also feeling like I had finally found what I was always looking for, and then I knew that these psychedelics, they're going to play a big part in my life. Um, yeah, that's my first experience. It's a sacred experience for me, very important experience, and I'm really grateful to have shared it with everyone listening and Jack. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lou. That is really beautiful. And please, let's have those notes on here sometime. There's like so much value in the integration for
Mm-hmm.
me of going back into any kind of old
Mm,
notes, anything that I wrote in the past. And like, I feel like
right.
I am doing a lot more of it recently. And it's like you get to re-embody this old memory, this
Right.
old piece of ourselves, and it can be very empowering.
Well, that gives me another idea for this podcast. It could be cool for, people who are willing to come on the podcast to talk about experiences and integrate them with us. It could be like a open collaborative integration session, and people who are listening might also have insights to share, that might be helpful to whoever was sharing about their experience.
That's a wonderful idea. Yeah, I'm into it.
Cool. Awesome. Um, well, I guess this wraps it up, doesn't it? Unless there was anything else, Jack, you wanted to share, maybe a few show notes.
Sure. Yeah, in closing, well, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope this has felt like a heartwarming and fun and community oriented experience for you as a listener. I think it certainly has for me and perhaps for you as well, Lou.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So, if you want to follow along on this podcast and tune in with us in the future, you can do that on YouTube. We'll also be getting uploaded to Spotify and Apple Podcasts, maybe Pocket Casts, TBD. We got to figure out all the RSS feed stuff. And then we'll also be sharing clips on our Instagram. If you
Okay.
haven't had a chance to check out howtousepsychedelics.com yet, we encourage you to do that. There's a bunch of free information on there, and more information about us and our mission. And if you have enjoyed listening, we encourage you to subscribe to HTUP wherever you may find us.
Right. Subscribe, follow, like, all that good stuff. Especially Instagram, though, because we're focusing on providing value through informational, posts on there. Um, yeah, and one more thing, if you have feedback for us, whether that be about the website, the Discord community, this podcast, let us know. This is our first podcast. For me, anyways, it's my first podcast ever recorded. So, I expect to take some time to get comfortable doing it. But this was a lot of fun. Thank you, Jack, for bringing the idea and leading us through this.
Heck yeah. Thank you, Lou. This has been wonderful. I think that's it. Is there anything we want to say in closing? I feel like a quote might be nice to close with.
I like that. Yeah, let's do a quote. Well, I'm going to share one of my favorite quotes, which really embodies the philosophy of how to use psychedelics, which is somewhat related to Saigaya. Saigaya is a combination of the word Sai, which is mind, and Gaia, which is earth. And we believe psychedelics reconnect you to the mind of the earth. And so this is a quote from the late Terence McKenna, who says, "Nature is alive and speaking to us. This is not a metaphor."
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. See you next time.
See ya.